Hello everyone, and welcome back to this fifth episode of TaleSpire Building Tips, where today we will learn about details, space and density of your build, and lighting. We'll first be working on detailing our house, starting from the bottom floor to the upper floor. We will do the roof later, as I feel it's always a nice finishing touch. A good way to add details is to take back the notes you've taken in the notebook. Here, the thing we've done in the second episode of this building tips series. And looking at the house, we've defined it could be either a witch house, a farmer house, or somewhat a rich merchant house. Looking at our build and what I want to do today, I think I'm gonna lean more toward the rich farmer house or toward a merchant house, someone that has some land, maybe a little bit of money, but not too much. You have to keep it at least somewhat believable. With a story, or at least an idea of the feel you want to convey, it's much easier to start building. And having an overall idea of where you want to go will always help you in getting more creative and also making more sense while building your asset. Obviously, I said I was going to finish by the roof, but this middle piece of roof, or this roof piece for the first floor, I'm just going to do right now. We will first place the door, and then we will work on the exterior facade of the first floor. The goal is to spice it up a little bit, rendering it more interesting. For the interior of the house, I'm first looking out for any gap I can find and closing them with either walls or pillars or anything that makes sense to cover some bigger holes I can see. For the floor, we'll be using the same techniques we've learned in the previous episode. This is to say, trying to avoid patterns and rendering it more interesting by varying up the tiles we use. We'll now furbish the first floor of the house, and for me this will be probably a dining room. I'm currently realizing that the space I'm using is a little too big. This is something that happens quite often because we're quite bad at estimating the correct size of objects and especially buildings. To avoid this, there is two methods. Either build smaller, actually it works, or you can simply try to divide the bigger rooms you've made into smaller ones. Here, this will be perfect for a pantry. We will apply this method to the rest of the rooms if we feel that one space is too big for us to fill in a convenient manner. Again, remember, we are always trying to tell a story. Here you can clearly see that someone can enter the house, see the dining room, the pantry is a bit closed off, and the private parts are also closed off to the right with another door. This looks somewhat believable and like someone could inhabit this place. It looks lived in and interesting to explore. For the second floor, we will be using the same method, though I will be starting from the smaller room or the furthest room because it's the one that I feel is the easiest to fill. This will help me design the overall feel of the second floor because once I have filled the easiest place, it will be easy to just expand outwards and fill the rest of the floor. Now that the house is finished and it looks quite good to me, we will finally start to work on the roof. We will finally start to work on the roof. The way I function with the roof is that I first place a really basic shape of a roof, and then I will try to add details to it. It's the same process every time. The goal is to have an easier time define the shape of the house and making it match with the shape of the roof, and then I can take time to adjust everything to get a creation that is better looking. Something interesting to note is that some assets are clearly identifiable at the first look. They cannot repeat because they're high detail, and if you put two of them close together, you'll see it directly. The wheel card is a good example of that. What I would recommend is obviously to use them because they're unique assets that look very well, but pay attention not to place them too close to each other. We now have totally finished the house. Of course, we can always come back to it later if we feel like changing a detail, but for me, it looks quite perfect right now. Though it's not the same for terrain. It looks a little bit empty and bland. There is two things to enhance that, or to improve the terrain. What we will do is that obviously we will do a detailed pass like we did with the house to furnish everything, but there is also some dead spaces. We always have to look at the space and density of what you're building. You need to create space for players to move in and also interesting spaces for your players to play with. Here, the density of terrain is a bit mismatched. There is like big empty spots and some spots that are already densely packed. What we will do to remedy that is that we will add some small details on our terrain. To the back of the house, we will be adding some garden crops. To the left of the house, we will be adding a little rock or cliff formation with a dead tree. That might be interesting. In the forest, to the south and middle of the map, I think we will add a small camp that will be always nice to look at. And at the start of the map, we will add some old ruins or some parts of a construction. Now that we have finished all the details of our map and that we are happy with our space and density, we can move on to finishing the details for the terrain and the forest. Everything seems to be finished, but if you paid attention, you may have noticed that I have not placed any source of light or any lighting at all. This is intentional because lighting requires a particular attention. Lighting is twofold or even threefold. You can use light to show your scene, simply illuminate a dark room, or you can use light to accentuate something, to show a specific place to your players. You need to be understanding those two parameters to be using light properly. And the third use of lighting, especially in TaleSpire, is the light from the skybox or the overall lighting of your scene. Is it darkness? Is it day? But we will come back to that later. For now, as you'll see, I'm placing each light carefully to either create ambience or just to illuminate the room. I'm trying to force players to look at specific places because the light will obviously draw their attention. For the overall lighting of your scene, as you can currently see, it can drastically affect the mood and ambience of your board. This is really important to understand, and it is also really a key way to show properly your asset. This is now the end of today's video on details and lighting. This has been a short one, but it took actually over 2 hours of building to complete. Though, we talked about how to add details to your main asset and to your terrain. We touch lighting and placement of lights to create more interesting themes, and we've also touched up the concept of space and density of your map to create, again, spaces that are interesting to your players. I hope you'll learn something during this video and have a good day.